My new Generation 4 Jabiru engine has now flown just over 3 hours, and I'm making this flight to complete 5 hours, at which time I need to carry out a full visual inspection as per the manufacturer's maintenance schedule to make sure nothing has come loose or fallen off. The flight is from North Weald to Orfordness via Great Oakley, then back to North Weald. The distance from Great Oakley to Orfordness is about 20 miles, with this relatively short section of coast having a variety of historical buildings, the oldest being Orford Castle, completed in 1173, right through to the 20th century Cold War buildings at Orfordness. The points of interest seen during this flight include Harwich Redoubt, HMS Ganges, Langard Fort at Felixstowe, RAF Bawdsey and Bawdsey Manor, a number of Martello Towers, Orford Castle, the site of the World War I airfield at Orfordness, the various Cold War buildings at Orfordness and the Cobra Mist site, all along this 20-mile stretch of East Anglian coast. As I fly from Essex into Suffolk, where the rivers Orwell and Stour meet to form Harwich Harbour, the town of Harwich is on the left, and the town of Felixstowe and its docks is on the north side of the river. The areas circled on the video and on the inset chart indicate the point where I turned for the return flight back to North Weald. There was a section of temporary restricted airspace a few miles to the north of here, which was closed for drone flying, which is something I suppose we will just have to get used to. From Great Oakley Airfield, it's a couple of minutes flying, passing Harwich to the left, crossing the river on a direct track to Langard Fort, which is directly ahead on the Suffolk side of the estuary. Strangely, the fort used to be considered part of Essex. In the 18th and 19th centuries, births and deaths within the garrison were recorded as Langard Fort, Essex. Henry VIII built a fort here in around 1540 as part of his coastal defences, which was rebuilt and strengthened over the years, with a major reconstruction completed between the years 1717 and the 1740s. Over the years, minor changes were made to accommodate advances in artillery capabilities, as well as a variety of World War I and World War II coastal defence roles, and a limited Cold War role as an observation communications post. After passing the seafront at Felixstowe, I approached the River Deben, passing over two of the Martello Towers, T and U. I'll explain how they were named later. Just to the north of the River Deben is Bawdsey Manor, where the First World War II chain home station was developed when Watson Watt and his team relocated in 1936 from Orfordness, and by 1937 the first of the chain home experimental towers were erected. The site at Orfordness was not completely shut down until 1937, and in the early days at Bawdsey Manor both sites were being used. This small tower is probably a later communications tower, probably part of RAF Bawdsey Bloodhound Mark II missile site, opened in 1978-79 as part of the UK's Cold War air defence network, remaining operational until May 1990. I took the photograph of the Bloodhound Mark II missile at the Muckleborough Collection Museum in Norfolk when I flew into Weybourne airstrip on the site. A Martello Tower is a small, usually coastal defensive fort based on a fortification in Corsica at Mortella Point, and these were built all across the British Empire in the 19th century. The 70 South East of England towers were built from Seaford in Sussex to Aldborough in Suffolk, with the round structures following a standard plan with slight variations, 29 being built between St Osyth's and Aldborough, as well as the supporting redoubt at Harwich. They were allocated letters starting with A at St Osyth's to Z at Alderton, then AA, BB, with CC being the last tower at Aldborough. A typical East Coast Martello would be about 45 foot in diameter at the base, 40 foot tall, with up to 13 feet thick brick-built walls. A tower housed between 15 and 25 men on 2 main floors. As seen on the inset chart, the bird sanctuary is dead ahead, and rather than disturb the birds or have a £5 Canadian goose come through the windscreen, I made a left turn here and tracked towards Orford. Henry II completed Orford Castle by 1173, and it's easy to spot from a distance with its unique 12-sided keep with 3 massive square towers attached. There are no outer walls left, as these were removed in the 16th and 17th century, no doubt spirited away to be used in some nearby building. As I'm only just over 1,000 feet as I approach Orford, I make a sharp turn to the right before I reach the town to avoid upsetting the residents. I took the inset photograph of Orfordness from the top of the castle during a visit by road. I first pass over the World War I Royal Flying Corps Armament and Experimental Flight airfield site. Directly ahead are the 2 Pagoda test labs, whose unique construction was designed to withstand the accidental detonation of 400 pounds of high explosives. In the event of an accidental explosion, the roofs would collapse, closing off the building, minimising damage. I flew out to sea and turned back to fly along the whole length of what was the top secret atomic weapons research establishment site between the early 50s until the mid 70s. After turning right overhead the pagodas, I pass over the various laboratories, including the Orfordness Black Beacon. Built in the 1920s, it broadcast an AM longwave radio signal via a large rotating loop antenna that allowed ships or suitably equipped aircraft to fix their position with varying degrees of accuracy. It worked with a similar unit based at Farnborough Airport, which enabled position fixing by triangulation, similar to how we used to use 2 VOR transmissions to fix positions prior to GPS. I've circled where the 98 foot tall 1792 built lighthouse used to be and included a photo I took in 2019, as well as a photo taken a year later in which I've captured the final stages of the lighthouse demolition. At the north end of the site, just before my turning point for the flight back to North Weald, is the Cobra Mist site, an Anglo-American experiment over the Horizon radar station at Orfordness. Between 1967 and 1971, the project was plagued with problems right from day one, resulting in the facility being shut down in 1973 with confusing and contradictory evidence as to the site's use after 1973. I fly back passing alongside the World War I airfield site where many aspects of aerial warfare that we take for granted today were developed. These include aerial photography, night flying, electrically heated flying suits, gun sights, parachute development, bombing techniques, new aircraft assessment, etc. It's hard to believe during World War I there were 600 personnel stationed at the airfield. There was a narrow gauge railway for transferring materials from the jetty to the airfield. Again, I have to avoid the bird sanctuary, which is dead ahead, so I do a right turn and pass to the north of Orford. As I turn, you can see the quay at Orford, which is where the ferry takes visitors across to Orfordness for visits arranged through the National Trust. For the return to North Weald, I take the same route back along the coast And you'll see two more Martello towers, one directly behind Felixstowe Pier, Tower Q, with Tower P a little further south as I approach the docks. At the time these towers were built, this section of coast would have looked very different prior to all of the development that's taken place over the years. This is Tower P, which was converted to a Coast Guard lookout, but I now understand it's disused. Flying directly overhead Landguard Fort, then across the estuary, I arrive at Harwich Redoubt, the Napoleonic fort built on a hilltop just outside the town in 1808. Before all the modern buildings and the allotments that now surround the fort, in the early 19th century there would have been an unrestricted line of fire across the entrance to the harbour. The redoubt worked together with Landguard Fort on the other side of the harbour to protect the entrance. From the Essex side of the river, Stena run a twice daily service to the Hook of Holland from Parkstone Quay Harwich International Terminal. The land dead ahead between the River Orwell on the right and the River Stour on the left is at Shockley Peninsula, where the remains of HMS Ganges, the Boys Royal Naval Land Training Establishment, can still be seen. The first HMS Ganges was launched in 1821, then in 1866 she was converted into a training ship for boy sailors, moored in various West Country locations before ending up in Shotley, where the land-based training facility was established. In 1930 Ganges was broken up in Plymouth and the captain's cabin was salvaged and incorporated into the Burr Island Hotel in Devon, which you can just make out in my Sandown to Bolthead video as I fly over. As I approach HMS Ganges, various buildings and the parade ground mast can be identified, and I think the mast is the same mast seen in the inset archive photograph. The land-based training establishment was eventually closed in 1976, but there is still a museum on the site. I did a 180 to fly back down the centre of the harbour along the dockside at Felixstowe. Felixstowe is the UK's largest and busiest container port, with the ability to handle the biggest container vessels afloat today. The port has two main container terminals. This is Trinity. There is also a roll-on, roll-off terminal which I've circled. This is the other container terminal, Landguard. I've included here a handful of photographs I've taken over the years of Felixstowe docks. I previously briefly referred to the early radar chain home towers at Ballsy Manor and Watson Watt and his team. Coincidentally, there's the best example of a chain home transmitter tower on our route back to North Weald. The usual setup was four 360-foot transmitter towers arranged in line with transmitting aerials suspended between, and four 250-foot wooden receiver towers arranged in a square that would pick up the returning signal, indicating approaching aircraft. I took this photo a few years ago of the Swingate site near Dover. The tower on the right is an original World War II tower. You see the platforms are missing. The left tower was installed well after World War II. The Marconi chain home tower was originally erected at RAF Canewdon in South East Essex in 1937, and in 1956 the tower was dismantled and rebuilt at Great Baddow on the Marconi site. I took this ground photograph of the tower in 2015. I took this aerial photograph of the tower in 2017. That was my 5 hours completed. Now back to Northwold for the 5-hour inspection of the engine. Performance wise, I'm really happy with these pressures and temperatures after an hour-and-a-half flight. And when I made the low revs long taxi back to park, the oil pressure did not drop off the gauge as with my old engine.